President Trump says the war with Iran could be over soon. But is Iran's regime really ready to give up its apocalyptic dreams and stop its jihad against Israel in the West? Raymond Ibrahim is here to help us make sense of it. Okay, Raymond, first explain to our viewers what Shia Muslims in Iran and elsewhere in the Middle East believe about the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, how this war with Israel and the United States reinforces their ideology.
Sure, Gary. So the Mahdi is a central figure in both Sunni and Shia Islam. He's an eschatological end-time figure. And the word itself means the guided one. So both Sunnis and Shias expect him to return. And there's minor variances about how he's seen and what he does, but they both accept him. But he's especially prominent amongst not just Shias in general, but the 12er variety, which currently dominates the regime. Iran is a 12er variety, which means this is a little complicated, but there's different kinds of Shia. Some believe the final Imam is the 5th, the 7th. The vast majority are the 12. Okay, so basically this has to do with the whole hierarchy thing, which is neither here nor there. But bottom line is the Mahdi is an eschatological, mystical figure who's supposed to be ushered in at the end times and to bring justice and goodness. Now, on the surface, this sounds good, but of course, from an Islamic paradigm, what does that mean? Well, if he's actually bringing goodness, that means he's bringing Islam, he's bringing the Sharia worldview, and he's fighting everyone who is seen as the enemy of Islam, of course. And now what makes Iran particularly dangerous is not just because of its 12er Shia variety and the Mahdi doctrine, but it's well known that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard especially espouses this ideology. And this ideology is really rife with concepts of martyrdom and sacrifice. So as you can see, this is not the exact mentality that you would want to have weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Of course, every country wants nuclear weapons, and I would argue Iran wants them for pragmatic, realpolitik reasons, just like the U.S. wants it, Israel wants it, everyone wants nuclear weapons. But I do believe that this particular doctrine, which is idiosyncratic to especially Iran, makes the danger much more pronounced than, of course, it's dangerous when any country has nuclear weapons. But when you have a group whose ideology is very much centered around bringing the end times in a mystical manner, and the end times are to be ushered in when the greatest enemies of Islam are defeated, which from an Iranian perspective would be the two great Satans, of course, the United States and Israel. And then this whole concept, you're probably familiar, you've seen Ashura, where basically the Shias to commemorate the martyrdom of Hussein, whip themselves in a frenzy. Okay, so it's this sort of embattled mentality that has gone on for centuries that sees themselves as martyrs, as victims, as having to do whatever they have to do, including whatever sacrifice, in order to bring about the goodness of Islam in the person of the Mahdi.
Well, President Trump knows that. I mean, he said they cannot have a nuclear weapon because of that. So knowing they think this way, how do you then negotiate with them? How do you work deals? Can they be trusted to abide by them?
Oh, this is the problem, and then there's another problem that actually compounds this, the first one. And again, it's almost, we can argue, particular to Shia Islam of Iran. And it's the doctrine of taqiyya. Taqiyya is this doctrine that allows Muslims to dissemble and essentially actively lie vis-a-vis the non-Muslim as required. And it has Quranic verses. One of the most primary ones is Quran 328. But what's interesting is if you argue with, and I've been in these debates before, and apologists will argue with me and say, no, it's just a Shia doctrine. And the fact is, Shias have indeed, of course, championed taqiyya. It's been very much integral to their identity, simply because they were the minority version, the minority Islam sect in the larger sect, the Sunnis. So they had more reason to dissemble around the Sunnis who would attack and kill them if they knew who they were. So this has gone on for centuries, and it's been said that the Shias are essentially, they have so internalized deception and duplicity. And I'm sorry I have to say this, and I'm not applying this to every single Iranian or even every single Shia, But I would say that it's fair to believe that the Iranian leadership, the regime, and especially, again, the Islamic Revolutionary Corps, does internalize and take on aspects of taqiyya, which essentially allow them to lie and deceive the infidel. So taken together, Mahdiism, martyrdom, sacrifice, eschatology, and then free reign to lie, yeah, I can see a strong argument to be made about not being able to trust the Iranian leadership.
You're a Middle East historian, so how do you believe this war will be viewed years from now? What will the history books say about it?
If the United States prevails, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I know a lot of people want to see the Iranian leadership and the mullahcracy gone, chief among them the Iranian people themselves. So I think it would be a great victory if it can be done.
On a spiritual level, though, is this really another battle between Western civilization and Islam? If it is, Western Europe is yet to participate in this one.
Yeah, well, you know, from a spiritual level, definitely from a historical level, we can talk about the ongoing conflict between Muslims and Christians, especially, or actually Muslims and everyone, to be honest. I've been quoting this frequently because it's very important today, and it's what the political scientist Samuel Huntington said in his book, The Clash of Civilizations, which is that the borders of Islam are bloody. And basically, this simple observation underscores the fact that wherever Muslims are territorially, whichever neighbor they abut against, they're in some form of conflict with. So on the one hand, this makes sense in the current Arab-Israeli, as it's called, now it's Iranian conflict because they're Muslims. On the other hand, you know, you mentioned Europe. They used to be they were the ones who would, of course, take the war to Islam for various reasons, mostly in the context of just war theory. That's what the Crusades were. But of course, you know, I believe your point is that right now Europe is reticent and so on and so forth. But that, of course, whether rightly or wrongly, is just part of their normal trajectory nowadays when it comes to Islam, which is just one of appeasement in any guise and any form.
And even if Iran is subdued and set back for a generation, do you believe Sunni Islam may eventually pose a greater threat to Israel in the West? Because many people would say, how could that be? Some have signed the Abraham Accords. Others may soon join in. So what do you tell them?
Well, honestly, this is the thing, you know, again, from a historical point of view and just based on numbers, the problem is because the Sunnis represent roughly 90% of the Muslim world, then yes, just based on that, they will cause 90% of the problems as opposed to the Shias. Historically, it was the Sunnis who waged constant wars of conquest, both of Christian territories, Western European territories, all around the world. It was Sunni caliphates and sultanates, not necessarily Shia ones, which were again, they were the minor ones who were embattled and fighting and hiding against the Sunnis. Moreover, it's interesting that all the historical manifestations of so-called Mahdis, people who claimed to be Mahdis, almost all of them were Sunnis, ironically. So certainly I think the long-term problem is always going to be Sunni Islam, or against Iran for pragmatic, realpolitik reasons makes absolute sense to me. But if you use the argument that we are attacking the head of radical Islam, that to me doesn't seem accurate, because really the heads would be the Sunni nations, it would be Saudi Arabia, it would be Egypt. If you look at who are the terrorists around the world, they're all mostly Sunnis. Of course you have Hezbollah, but you have Al-Qaeda, you have ISIS, you have Hamas, you have Boko Haram, you have Al-Shabaab. These are all Sunnis. So this is really the ultimate problem. And then you find that the U.S. and Israel are friends with Saudi Arabia. If they can be friends with Saudi Arabia, then clearly the conflict can't ultimately be about religion with Iran. This is why I say there's sort of an interplay between pragmatism, realpolitik, and also ideology, with a special emphasis on what Shia Islam brings. But even if that's eliminated at one point, honestly, the Sunni issue is much greater for the long term. Well,
you know, Iran has these proxy militias, as you mentioned, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and they may become less active without Iranian support. But as you say, the Sunni, remember, Muslim Brotherhood is not out of the picture here. You know them well because you're an Egyptian American. Neither is Erdogan in Turkey. They helped create and support ISIS. So more is coming. You think it's a looming threat from Sunni Islam despite the Abraham Accords?
Yeah, and let's go back to the concept of tekeya, deceiving. I said it's especially integral and almost internalized amongst Shias for various historical reasons. But I also said Sunnis do it too. So it is expedient, if it's expedient for a Muslim of Sunni or Shia variety to say certain words to the infidel because it's advantageous in the now, based on whatever circumstance the Muslim finds himself in, he's weaker, let's say, and he says this or that, then that's absolutely agreeable. So something like the Abrahamic Accords could ultimately be a ruse, which is agreeable now because it's helpful to the Muslim nations due to their inherent weakness. But once that circumstance changes, then the whole thing can be reneged on.
Okay, Iranian and Shia power in the Middle East may be lessened, but we need to be aware of what may be coming from other Islamic extremists as well. Expert on Islam, historian Raymond Ibrahim. Your latest book is The Two Swords of Christ, 5 Centuries of War Between Islam and the Warrior Monks of Christendom. Thanks for being with us, Raymond. God bless you.
You too. Thanks, Gary.